So, your name is all over this book without your name being all over this book.
And we're happy with that.
Yeah, and this is, you're Victor McPherson, right?
McPherson and Matt Parsons and I talked to Mark and Leon. Didn't want any credit, don't want anything. We were so happy that they wrote about Mr. Wada, Douglas Tashia Wada.
So, but that was the driving force, so give me a little bit of your background.
How far back? As a kid,
Born on a mountaintop in Tennessee, okay, yeah.
I started off with CIA at the age of 19. I was a clerk. From there, I joined the Army CIC, now known as Army MI. I was an MI agent. When I finished my tour as an enlisted Army MI agent, I walked across the street and joined what was then known as NIS. I served for 30 years as an NCIS special agent. And during that time, I was lucky enough to get a direct commission as a naval officer, intel officer, and I retired as 30 years. But somewhere along the line, I became curious about our history, and if it wasn't nailed down, I would steal it, take it, and file it away. Well, I found out that a lot of people don't really care about history, and I would, when I was at headquarters, they were throwing things away, so I had a tendency to pick it up. And I loved doing research at the time. I didn't really when I was younger, but I just find history fascinating. And as I mentioned earlier, I saw a photograph of Wada in the 1957 class. He doesn't fit in. Most of the Americans are Caucasian. I won't say they're all 6 feet tall, but they're pretty tall. And Wada, I think, was 4 feet 8. And for years, I was curious of who this guy was. And we didn't go searching Wada for a while until one day, by accident, I ran across his original personnel card, which was about 3x5 card with his photograph on it. Then I knew who it was, talked to Matt, and we started searching everything we could, from Ancestry.com to newspapers to our own files. Well, if you go to the NCISA.org, actually NCISAhistory.org, all the information we had collected on ONI is there. Unfortunately, Wada's only mentioned 3 times. He was the first civilian special agent to be transferred to Japan. He was mentioned as the only non-Caucasian special agent by our first director, who was Captain Johnson. And I forgot the 3rd time. So there's really not a lot about Wada in our history. So everything we were able to find was newspaper articles and National, wow, what does NARA stand for? Yes, it's National Archives and Research Administration, sorry, in College Park. And slowly but surely, we got very excited. We had collected a lot, but no one really cared. I hate to say it, our own organization wasn't that excited about WADA. And so when Leon started looking for subject material along with Mark Harmon, Matt and I, who you'll meet later on this evening, were really excited that somebody could see what an exciting person this was. I mean, a very, very, very interesting life from the time he was a kid living in in Hawaii until the time he died. Fascinating individual, but no one knew about him. And as I said, if you see books on Wada, they probably talk about him being a Navy commander, which he was. He was a reserve intel officer. But we were interested because he was actually an NIS agent. He spent 20 years in Japan. He had credentials. He never worked in this office. He worked for the various admirals who were holding the position of Commander Naval Forces Japan. And he had a lot to do with their success. The Japanese law enforcement and intel community really respected him. He was allowed to do a lot of things that probably other agencies could because of his background.
In doing the research, I know it was mentioned earlier about the family's lack of interest perhaps, but lack of responsiveness, let's just say that. Did you read much into that, or other than the fact that?
Well, I don't think his granddaughter knew who we were, and she had reason to mistrust us. Matt and I wrote a letter that we co-signed and sent to the family. Matt has written several books on history to his high school, actually, the people who served in the armed forces. I had done a lot of research, and I had some intelligence background, so we both tried to explain why we were interested in the family, and that we would just like to talk to them. So like I said, we went back and forth, both signed this letter, never heard a word, we were ghosted. But I understand that the mother was older, she doesn't know who we are, and we didn't cold call her, just trying to explain we're serious, we're proud of you, we would like to get more information, and he never answered us. So I was kind of surprised when the grandson called Leon, because they had completely ghosted us, but we still maintained the research we had done, and we were overjoyed to send a ton of stuff to Leon and Mark Harmon that they could read.
What was the hardest thing about doing the research? There's at some point, there's dead ends, and you're on a roll, and all of a sudden it just comes up dark.
Well, how do I say this? There's not a lot written about him. He's in various books, but to really know his life story is, without the family cooperating, we don't know a lot of things about his family and what his childhoods were like. We do know some things, but it would have been so much nicer if the family could have filled in those gaps.
The Tokyo trial, which I found personally interesting, because I talked about the relationship I had with another person. How did you find out about that?
Well, it's in several newspapers that, first of all, he was commissioned as a naval intel officer. I believe he was commissioned so that he could go to the trials, because going as a civilian special agent might not have registered, but going there as actually he wasn't commissioned as an ensign. I think he was actually commissioned as a lieutenant. So they brought him in so he could function as the number 2. I've never heard the young lady, the woman, I'm sorry, that did the translation. But he really, there were 100 people there working in that shop, and he was the number 2.
Over there.
But he was just a fascinating, very intelligent, spoke several languages, and Leon didn't mention it, but his family tricked him into going back to Japan. He had finished McKinley High School in Hawaii. His brother was killed in an accident, and his family sued and got quite a bit of money at the time, like $15,000, part of which they used to send him back to Japanese high school, and he spent 4.5 years there, and I think he was accepted at one of the colleges in Japan. But that's the time, I believe, Japan was at war with Chinese or somebody, and they were drafting everyone they could. And members of his old baseball team, but he was in Hawaii, happened to be traveling, and he snuck out of the country with them and came back and went to college and played 4 years, first string, second base, I believe.
That's the whole baseball story, He'd have been great with the White Sox. He could have been the Nellie Fox, which is a little point. I'm gonna stop, postscript. Nellie Fox, who was the be-all and end-all for you Chicago White Sox fan. His first year of professional baseball was in Jamestown, New York. He was part of the Philadelphia Athletics. They sent him here. He was a center fielder. I digress, Victor.
No problem.
But ultimately, everything happens in Jamestown here, if you haven't gotten the story.
Yeah, all right. Well, we know Lucille Ball is from here.
Lucille Ball and Roger Torrey Peterson, if you're an ornithologist, it's all that stuff. So you're working pretty hard at trying to get him into to be recognized.
Yes.
Yeah. And how's that going?
Well, Leon and Mark Harmon have they have the name and recognition. Both Matt and I are obviously retired agents, but I've been retired 26 years, so, and it doesn't really matter, you do things not really for the recognition, we just want to make sure this individual is recognized, and I still go back to Mark described it. I was so excited but he and Mark Harmon, with Leon and Mark Harmon even considered, because he was a great man, and he did a lot, and no one has ever heard of the guy. I shouldn't say no one's heard of him, they've heard of the commander, but he's, in our book, he's a special agent. And as you said earlier, you asked the question, to us, if you are a special agent or retired, it's a big deal.
You're a big deal. Leon's a big deal. I am so thrilled that we could grab you folks on a moment in time here in Jamestown, New York, and man, hopefully it's not the last.